And I'm Laura Jones. So good to have all of you with us here this Friday morning. And Lisa, last week we saw some incredible video from around New Jersey, flooding and homes just ripped apart by tornado. And there were some stories of some heroic rescues, including this one out of Mercer County. A Ewing police officer saved a woman from a raging flood as waters from remnants from Ida were hitting New Jersey. Now, this body cam footage is of Officer Justin Quinlan, and he was pulling the woman from fast-moving water. It's just, I'm here in Lambertville, and we had a ton of flooding. And still looking at the videos, I can't believe what I'm seeing, even though it was happening right in front of my eyes.
Yeah. Oh, how scary. How scary is that? I have goosebumps.
Yeah.
And last week's show, we were talking about it off air. I mean, what a, just devastation up and down the state that it's going to take a long time for people to recoup from.
It really is. And I think, and we're going to bring Mike Favetta in pretty soon, but one of the things I think is confusing sometimes or just baffling is New Jersey, we're used to nor'easters. We're not used to tornadoes hitting. And that really was just, it was devastating and shocking as people were watching and seeing this happen.
Well, we'll bring in Mike Favetta now to get a check on the New Jersey weather. Mike, at least we had a semi-peaceful week in the aftermath of this storm.
We did. The week was rather peaceful, good for cleanup. So many homes and neighborhoods across New Jersey still cleaning up, and the weather faring decent even going into this weekend. And that really takes the headline for the next few days, is just how crisp and clear the weather is. Had a little bit of a chilly start here in New Jersey this morning with temperatures down in the 50s, now climbing through the 60s, but we'll be on our way to 76 degrees later on today. It'll feel very nice throughout the afternoon with a low level of humidity and quite comfortable. So some of the weather headlines across New Jersey show that the rivers continue to recede over the next several days. In fact, many of the kind of the late receding rivers down toward Fairfield and there by the Passaic River at Pine Brook finally going back below flood stage. The weekend weather looks absolutely spectacular, and then going into next week, couple of shower chances on them. Good news. As far as today's weather, will hold in the mid-70s, 74 over toward Camden, 73 down in Lacey Township, and a lovely 72 degrees in Atlantic City. But it's that low humidity that makes it feel like fall and will keep it feeling like autumn for the next few days. Even with the 3-day forecast, highs climb back into the 80s with that comfortable level of humidity for Sunday as well as Monday. And we're nice and dry going forward this weekend, but I'll show you coming up in just a bit on the 7-day forecast. Could be a few rounds of showers next week that we'll talk about. Those details coming up in just a few minutes. Lisa Marie, Laura?
Thanks, Mike. Very refreshing report from you. Homeowners in Mullica Hill are still cleaning up more than 1 week following the tornado with 150-mile-per-hour winds that ripped through the area. Hundreds of homes and buildings were damaged or destroyed, but no one in Gloucester County died as a result of the storm. Thank goodness for that. Cleanup and repair crews are all over the area, assessing if some homes can be saved. Today, the Gloucester County Library in Mullica Hill, an expanded recovery center, will open with FEMA representatives along with local and county resources. President Joe Biden has approved major disaster declarations, releasing federal disaster funds to help flood-ravaged parts of our state. The president was here in New Jersey this week to see the damage for himself. He joined Governor Murphy to tour parts of Somerset County. They visited an emergency management training center and a neighborhood in Manville, where floodwaters caused explosions and fires in buildings. After visiting storm-damaged areas in our state, President Biden spoke about climate change, saying it's code red.
For decades, scientists have warned of extreme weather would be more extreme, and climate change was here, and we're living through it now. We don't have any more time.
Later that day, the president traveled to Queens, where several people were killed in flooded basement apartments.
So much sadness. And it's hard to believe that 20 years ago tomorrow, September 11th, 2001, the nation, the world, watched in horror as the clear skies of a September day were shattered right in front of us. New York's World Trade Center and the Twin Towers crumbled after two hijacked planes crashed into them, killing thousands of people as they both fell to the ground. In Arlington, Virginia, the Pentagon came under the same attack as a jet slammed into the western side of the building. And in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, brave passengers fought to stop their hijacked plane from suffering a similar fate, forcing the attackers to crash into a field. Now, that day is seared into the American consciousness, changing the world as we know it. As we pause to remember the heroes of that day, we look back at what happened, how it's changed us, and what it means for the world today. Joining us now is former New York City news anchor and reporter Frank Sapola, who covered the events of that day as they unfolded, and he's here to share his story with us. Frank, so good to see you.
Ladies, good morning. A pleasure to be here. I do want to mention I have not talked about this in 20 years. I've only decided this past weekend to do so, and I've done very few interviews. I wanted to bring my remembrances to NJ On Air, so I'm happy to be here.
Oh, Frank, thank you so much. Well, why don't you take us back to that day and where you were, what you saw?
I was actually working at Channel 9 in New York City. I had started there about 6 months before. I was off that day. Obviously, I saw it on TV like a lot of people did. And then the job of the reporter is, how do I get to the scene and start reporting? And it was made more difficult by the fact that you couldn't drive into New York City. You could not take a train into New York City. A lot of my reporter friends actually went by boat over the Hudson River. Private, boaters had their boats and they were charging to take you over the river. What do I remember? I remember the Twin Towers going up in New York City when I was in high school. And it was so typical New York because we couldn't have just one of the tallest buildings in the world. We had to have two. It was that much. And I remember going to high school. I grew up in Queens. You could see them rising up in lower Manhattan from a distance. And I was thinking the other day that I actually worked in both buildings when I was in radio. And to get a pass to get into the buildings, and this obviously is pre 9/11, you had to go to the sub basement of the World Trade Center and get a special ID, which I did. And then a year after the attacks, I actually stood in what was, the bathtub. They used to call the bathtub where they were. I actually stood in about the same spot where I got my ID minus the buildings. And that was really profound. I remember that, I had been there and now the buildings were gone. It's difficult to see it in your mind's eye. I still have visions. I haven't been able really to talk about it in about 20 years. Like every good reporter, you go to the scene, you do what you can, you take all those emotions and feelings, you put them in a box and you revisit it later. And it took me about a year to revisit that box.
Frank, I'm glad you brought that up. I was working at News 12, New Jersey. I was in Trenton covering the State House. My beat was to cover the governor. We actually went down to ground zero with the governor a couple of days later. And one of the things that you touched on that I know I experienced myself is I didn't cry. To a certain degree, work was comfort. It gave me a sense of purpose. I was able to get the information. I was able to give it to people, even though we didn't know we didn't have a full picture of what was going on. We still are finding out information. So as you were working, were you able, you did like similar to I did, where you have to just go into that work mode. But I found myself that I didn't cry about it, not for maybe when I watch stories about it now on TV, it will affect me emotionally. But were you impacted as you were covering the stories?
No, I've been in this business a very long time. Both of you have been in this business as well. People sometimes say to us, how can you be so cruel? You can be so cruel because you cover the story. That's your job. And then you go back and you process it at a later date and in private, which is what I did. And it was very emotional like a year later. It took me a year again to open up that box. But to answer your questions, you do what you can. You do it as best as you can. And, one of the reasons I've been doing these interviews, and I decided just over this past weekend to do so, is because we've talked about the 3,000 families whose lives were affected by the loss of a loved one. We've talked about the 353 brave first responders, men and women who went into that building, were killed in the collapse or crushed by the debris. But there's so little discussion about the reporters. First of all, there were 5 technicians on the top of the World Trade Center that day, and they got trapped up there. They were maintaining the big antenna, which was at on top of one of them. And then so many of my friends right now and continuing are dealing with aggressive cancers from what was in the air that day. If you remember, New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman, who was the EPA chief at the time, went to the site and said, the air's fine. We knew it wasn't fine. All you had to do was smell it. There were millions and millions of tons of pulverized plastic and insulation and drywall, and we were breathing it in. I remember doing a stand-up, which is one of these live shots you do from the scene, and I had a handkerchief that I had to put over my mouth until they cued me on camera. I'd say my 2 or 3 lines. I'd go into the report, the pre-taped report, and then when we came back to me, I took the handkerchief off again and I put it back on. You could not breathe that air and not know that there was something that was going to hurt you later on, and that's exactly what has happened.
When walking around that area in the aftermath, I brought my shoes home. And for the longest time, I put them on the shelf and I couldn't wash them off. They were covered with ash because that represented what has ultimately come the final resting place for those 3,000 souls. And that was, that was very difficult. Are there any stories that you had along the way, or some of them, like you said, that haven't been told, of the people who had to keep on working, whether it was rescue, reporters bringing that information? Because, we went from 9/11 right to Afghanistan and the hunt for bin Laden.
Well, it's funny you should mention that, you had your shoes. I would say about a month after the attacks, when they were taking the refuge and they were putting it in barges to be shipped over to the Fresh Kills landfill, I asked one of the workers, can I have a piece of the World Trade Center? And he gave me this long piece of steel, which I kept up until about a year ago. I found it about a year ago, and I just did not want that memory or that bad energy in my home, and I threw it away. I do have from the World Trade Center, if you know about it, had a restaurant on the top that was called Windows on the World. I do have a matchbook from that restaurant, but that's the only real memento I have. There are so many memories. Laura, let me tell you a poignant story. About a week before 9/11, I was at a funeral for a firefighter who had died in a fire unrelated to 9/11, obviously. And Father Judge was there that day. And, following the funeral, I stepped out and I talked to some of these firefighters who had attended, a long line of them, hundreds of them. I shook their hands. We did some interviews. We laughed and so on and so forth. I've often wondered how many of those firefighters I talked with that day or shook their hands did not know, obviously, that they wouldn't be around a week later. And, it haunts me sometimes because I saw their faces. They were young men and women. And I know some of them I spoke with would not live another week.
Frank, I know we have photos of you at Ground Zero year after 9/11. We want to scroll through them now. I just want to thank the both of you because I admire your bravery in going to Ground Zero the day of and in the days after. I was a senior in high school. So my perspective was I was just entering the real world, getting ready for college and all this exciting stuff. And then 9/11 happened and just totally put a different perspective on the whole thing. All of a sudden, entering the real world became a little scarier.
Yeah.
But through your brave reporting and telling the stories and being so open and honest, all the reporters, I thank you for that because you really bridge that gap between my little high school and what was really happening.
I don't want to overstate what I did because I have friends. Just one 6 months ago, his body riddled with aggressive cancers. All over his body passed away. I had a very dear friend I worked with every single day who has early onset Parkinson's disease from covering that. Other friends of mine with prostate and other cancers. We didn't know. We did what we were supposed to do. I did what I was supposed to do. It was no better or no worse than anybody else. But, now we're suffering the consequences. And it's not to take away from anyone who lost a loved one or any first responder. But, reporters cover that story as well. And a lot of them are dying now, and they need to be honored.
They definitely do. Frank, thank you so much for sharing your story here with us this morning.
It's a pleasure to be on with you. Thank you.
So Laura, coming up next, we have some incredible video of a teacher stopping a runaway car. And you can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll keep you updated on who is going to be on the show. Be sure to check us out and click follow.
2020 felt like a dark tunnel, and while 2020 is over, the impact is not. The pandemic affected both our physical and mental health.
We started the Cody Fund for Mental Health to change lives, so we want you to know about NJ211.
It's a referral service for anyone in crisis, even children.
I'm living proof that there's light at the end of the tunnel.
And it's not a train, it's help. It's NJ211.
The American Lung Association invites you to join us outside in 2021 for our Fight for Air Climb events. Now more than ever, we need you in the fight for clean air and healthy lungs. Let's go outside and climb, because every step counts. Visit us at lung.org.
Welcome back to the New Jersey Morning Show on this Friday, September the 10th.
An alert teacher in Linden jumped into action and avoided a pretty serious accident. Take a look. A parent jumped out of that white SUV to drop off their child's forgotten iPad. It looks like that parent left the car in gear and it kept rolling directly at some students and teachers at Seoul Middle School. Teacher Valerie Torriello jumped into the moving car and was able to stop it in time. Go, Valerie.
It was heading right for that group of students. That's just, wow.
Hey,
it looked like slow motion. And when things like that happen, it's kind of like, whoa, am I actually seeing what I think I'm seeing?
Yeah, I mean, that's so scary. But at the same time, you can't blame the parent. I'm sure they had a million and one things going on in their head, being pulled in many different directions, as the both of us know.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Sometimes, you just forget to park your car. I don't know. I mean, things just happen, but thank God it was thwarted. So that's all.
Well, that's it. That's it. We're all human. We are going to make mistakes. And thank goodness somebody just jumped into action instead of saying, let me just start recording this for my TikTok or something, right?
Yes. Yep.
Definitely.
So speaking of back to school, kids may be facing anxiety and uncertainty as they head back into the classroom. And some students may be returning to school with anxiety, grief, and gaps in social skills. These adverse childhood experiences, known as ACEs, are potentially traumatic events that occur in childhood. To help, the organization Action for ACEs is launching a back-to-school campaign, #TraumaTools, promoting healing, recovery, and wellness this school year. Joining us now to talk about this is Dave Ellis, the Executive Director for the Office of Resilience within the NJ Department of Children and Families. Good morning, Dave.
Good morning, and good morning to you both, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on to talk about this very important topic. Let's talk about what kids may be experiencing in their first weeks back to school.
It's been, 14 months that kids have been at home pretty much. I just call it on lockdown. I talk a lot with parents and with kids about what's truly going on. And you stop and think about the time away, the lost time of being with your friends. And now you're going into a situation where even the adults are not sure of what's going to happen. And so you've got all of that insecurity, unsecurity, if you will, that's driving all of those young people to try to figure out now, this isn't a new normal, this is just new. And so they're trying to navigate something that they've never had to deal with, as well as the adults in their lives trying to navigate things that they've never had to deal with.
Well, you bring up a good point. You've got administrators, teachers, they're trying to get as typical of a school year as they can, but in the back of their mind, they've got to be prepared because they don't know if there's going to be another variant, if they're going to have to go in lockdown again. So can you explain for us, we mentioned ACEs. What are ACEs?
Well, ACEs can be just about anything, really, when you think about it. The simple definition that I like to use is anything that happens too often, too fast, too much, too intense for the body to actually move through, and we get stuck. And that being stuck is what causes the problem, that we can't move our bodies beyond that. And so it can be anything from experiencing violence in the home or witnessing that, having a member who's attempted suicide, loss of a parent. It can be neglect or some type of abuse. So there are multiple things that can be an adverse childhood experience. We also know that there are adverse childhood things that happen, even like the community where you live. Even though the research hasn't gone out and said this is an adverse childhood experience, we know that living in a community that is riddled with violence and gunshots, that has an adverse effect, not only on the children, but on the adults in that community also.
Of course. What signs should parents and teachers look for in students in distress?
Students, this will come out in multiple ways. And you may not notice a change at all at this point in time. It may come out later in life. Okay, so what you're looking for are things that are out of the norm, if you will. So who's the child who used to be really gregarious, who's now not? Who's the child that's trying to overplease? Right? And so there are things that you start to look for that say, this isn't how my child would normally behave. And, I want to caution that in a setting of a school, we have expectations of what children should act like. Sometimes that's not how they will act, and we can get thrown off. And so as we're thinking about kids going back to school, let's think about how we as a society actually begin to engage with those children in a way that they feel safe, protected, and in an environment where they can learn.
Well, then that brings me to my next question is, what do you do if you see a child who isn't acting right? You don't want to make a deal of it necessarily, but you also don't want to ignore things. And it's hard to tell what is just being a teenager and what is trauma. And, as adults, if we think our child or we see somebody else has had this terrible experience or an adverse experience, what do we do?
I have 5 adult children, 19 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren.
God bless you.
Thank you. As my wife says, all children bring you joy, some by coming, some by going.
The thing, I like that. I'm going to have to remember that.
As I've done this work, I have come to find out that adults, 2 out of 3 kids in this country have adverse childhood experiences in their background. That's the national numbers. But we also know that 3 out of 3 adults can help. And it's simple things that you can do. It's not, you have to find this evidence-based practice. Sit down and talk with a child, play a game. This is about relationships. This is about how do you build a relationship with a child and be a caring, competent adult to help that child figure out whatever it is that is causing distress. And it will help the adult also begin to understand whether that's their parents. And, we talk about educators and law enforcement often because that's what this campaign is targeted at. The reality is we're all in this. It doesn't matter. I mean, even the 2 of you, share some time with a child, spend some time. If nothing else, just listen and give them space to be who they are. The hardest thing that we have as an adult is just to be able to listen to someone, because we always want to butt in to get our questions answered and to know deeper. Sometimes we'll get more information if we just listen.
And very, very sage advice. Tell us about Actions for ACE and how is the organization and the campaign helping?
One of the things I have learned is that if you don't know better, you can't do better. And so the whole point of Actions for ACEs, this is something, this office is a very unique office. It's a one-of-a-kind office, and I'm in a one-of-a-kind position. This campaign is designed literally to bring awareness to educators, to law enforcement, and to the community at large. Because all of us, I keep telling folks, this is the space that if we truly want to attack root causes of the most intractable problems that we have, this is it. And awareness is the first step in that work. If you don't know better, you can't do better. So we're constantly creating website pieces and marketing tools that can be downloaded. If you go out to the Actions for ACES webpage, you'll find all kinds of tools and toolkits. You'll find out about upcoming trainings that are open to the public. There are multiple things that are sitting out there just ready for people to download and utilize. The difference we're making, we launched the statewide action plan in February. We launched this campaign in April. What I can tell you is that the explosion and the excitement in the state of New Jersey, it must be contagious, because if you look at what's happening across the country, we are the #1 most recognized state in doing this work. We are on the map and people are recognizing what's happening, and communities are beginning to change the way they do their work. This is about community. This is about where, if you want to know where the answers are, they sit out in community. And so creating the awareness is the thing that helps us actually connect with those people who can show us the way to ending what I just consider to be one of the pandemics that we're in.
Dave, thank you so much for joining us here. Congratulations on such great work in such a short amount of time. And you can learn more by visiting actions4aces4.com. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
I love that. 2 out of 3 children affected, 3 out of 3 adults can help. Love that. Giving you power for affecting change. So let us now change topics and bring in meteorologist Mike Favetta for a check on the New Jersey weather. Mike, over to you.
That's right. Those kids will be hopping and skipping to school today in the fresh air. Got a beautiful start to the day and a beautiful start to the weekend. There's a crisp feeling outside across New Jersey. In fact, we'll go down to some of the temperatures right now in northern New Jersey, and we begin in the mid-60s. It feels fantastic. Up there, up in Bergen County, 66 degrees, right over toward Ramsey, down by Patterson, 68, and even through parts of Newark, 70 degrees right now. We'll warm slightly throughout the course of the day, and then eventually bring back more sun going into this afternoon. The Pine Barrens typically cool off quite a bit this time of year with that dry air and sandy soil, so you've cooled off to 65 overnight. But even Atlantic City and down toward Cape May, getting in one of those last-minute vacations, a nice cool start for you as well. Want to switch over to the autumnal equinox, because as we begin with a dry beginning to the day, we have just 12 days left in summer, with astronomical fall beginning next Wednesday, September 22nd. We'll start to see that sunrise rise a little bit later, sunset happen a little bit earlier, and even those overnight lows dip down into the 50s. It will be a cool morning tomorrow for any outdoor ceremonies or services for 9/11. Starting off at 8 a.m., 62 degrees. It'll stay sunny and cool throughout the course of the day, climbing to a high of only 74 tomorrow. So that dry weather remains even going into the weekend. Our weekend weather stays clear with a little bit of a warm up by Sunday. Look at how the temperatures jump into the low 80s up in Morristown, over toward Newark, even by Belmar. A fantastic looking day out for the beaches. However, if you plan to go to the beaches this weekend, please keep in mind that there is some very rough surf. There is a hurricane spinning offshore, Hurricane Larry, which is allowing for a high risk of rip currents, and that is promoting some big-time surf at the beaches, and a lot of those beaches are now unguarded due to the fact that we're entering the off-season. So please keep that in mind. We'll talk more about how tomorrow's weather relates to, well, the weather 20 years ago on the dates, how there was a hurricane offshore driving the winds and making it crystal clear on 9/11. Those details with some weather maps. That's coming up for you in just a few minutes.
Wow, that just gave me chills, how there's a correlation between the weather.
Very similar correlation, yeah. You'll see it on the maps.
But on a happier note, I mean, I know you were talking about the beaches, but it looks like we're going to have beautiful weather for New York Giants football Sunday.
Oh, we definitely will. You know that. It's almost like, remember what was about 15 years ago, I was at the stadium during one of these preseason games, and the stadium ran out of beverages because it was so warm. Those sitting in the sun just kept getting drinks because it was so hot, and the stadium ran out of, I think this is the old stadium, ice and beverages. So hopefully they've corrected that issue.
Hopefully, yes.
Meteorologist Mike Favetta, thank you so much. Next up, we are going to talk to the former Newark fire chief and his experience 20 years ago on 9/11. And remember, check out the New Jersey Morning Show on social media, follow and like. We'll be back right after the break.
The American Lung Association invites you to join us outside in 2021 for our Fight for Air Climb events. Now more than ever, we need you in the fight for clean air and healthy lungs. Let's go outside and climb, because every step counts. Visit us at lung.org.
Swing the hips.
Oh boy, they weren't kidding. Whew.
You're looking for a gold crown.
Sure. So you say you're helping people through. How are you doing that?
Welcome back to the New Jersey Morning Show. And we've been talking about the 20th anniversary of the September 11th attacks. And joining us now is former City of Newark Fire Chief John Centeni to talk about his incredible story, how he circumvented all of the roadblocks going into New York to go and help. John, thank you so much for joining us here this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So John, take it away. Tell us your experience on September 11th, 2001.
So in my experience, I would have to start from the beginning of the day. And as I just heard you talking about in your earlier segment with the weather, it was a beautiful day. And I recall that so vividly. I was assigned as a captain up in the West Ward of Vailsburg Fire Company Engine 21. And we were performing housework duty with the other members of the company. And it just had a nice fresh kick in the air, and everybody was in an up mood until the news hit. During our housework duty, we heard people yelling, "Come to the TV," and we saw the tower that was just struck by a plane and the flashes that were coming across. At that time, we all were taking notice and paying attention to see whether it was just an accident or what else was going on. From the volume of fire and smoke, everybody was speculating that it was a large plane. During that time, it was very ironic. I was studying for battalion chief with a dear friend of mine that was also studying, and we were just in the midst of going to classes on building collapse and different things. So we were really in tune to what happened and how much damage this building took. The Vailsburg Firehouse happened to be on one of the highest parts of Newark, and we went to the roof and we could actually see the columns of smoke rising from New York City. And we knew how serious this was. Shortly after, the other plane hit, and I think at that point we knew it was no accident. It was terrorism, and everyone was really engaged. And the fear of the amount of people that we were going to lose, not only civilians, but possibly firefighters in this, was just reverberating through everyone. As the day evolved, shortly after the second tower was hit, we were calling dispatch and putting ourselves on a list. If anyone was going to be dispatched in New York City, we were a company that were willing to go. Orders came down from above that no one was allowed out of the city. They weren't dispatching anybody at that point. You know, at that stage as a young officer, I didn't understand the reasons behind it. I understand more now. They didn't want freelancing and accountability issues with who was going and who wasn't. But as the day evolved, we were getting calls from members from the off-coming shift that went right out to New York City that morning, telling us, "You have to get out here. There's people trapped everywhere, firefighters trapped everywhere." And once the towers came down, there was no doubt in our mind that we had to get out there. So,
Chief, you're trained to run in when everybody else is running out. Obviously, nobody has had dealt with something this catastrophic. When the day was kind of playing out, were you able to stay in a work mode? How emotional is that? Because not only are you doing your job and that's going into the unknown, you're getting reports that your colleagues are not coming out in mass. I mean, it wasn't just perhaps one or two injured on the site. This was, entire battalions wiped out. I mean, what was going through your mind? How were you coping with that?
I think the whole situation played out so surreal. We were at that time meeting with chief officers in particular firehouses to gather a strategy. There was also a concern for secondary and other attacks. Newark may have been a target. So we were putting plans together on how we would respond internally with the city. So I think, at one point you're keeping your mind focused on doing your job, but in the back of our head, we knew when our shift was over that afternoon, we were heading out to the city. And how we accomplished that, one of our members had a connection with the Coast Guard, a Coast Guard officer that was stationed in the Bayonne Navy Yard, and they were setting up for a off-site morgue. How terrible that sounds. So at the end of our shift, we carpooled with maybe 24 members, some officers, firefighters that got off of work, and we met out there, and the Coast Guard took us over. And that's really where my story becomes so surreal and eerie. At the time, I shared one cell phone at my home. So when I was in work, I didn't take the cell phone. My wife kept it. But we were going over on Coast Guard boats, and the sky was dark, only lit by fire in one part of Manhattan. Helicopters were flying overhead. And I think that's when it really hit me, and I realized how serious of a situation, what was going on and where we were going to. I had asked one of the guys on the boat that had a phone if I can do a quick call home, and I just wanted to talk to everybody. One of the things that I spoke to Lisa about was the most unbelievable part of this was I was there that night. We got there around 7:00 and we stayed till well after midnight. I was there for several days after, and I had members of our department that were there for days and weeks and months, well beyond what I did. But during that whole time, I did not encounter one body, one savable person. I describe it as a Godzilla movie. As a kid, I remember watching that Godzilla movie where even as a kid, you knew it looked fake. The fire trucks were smashed and twisted, ambulance, cop cars upside down, buildings laying everywhere, fire coming out of the surrounding buildings, but no bodies, no injured bodies, no recoverable bodies that we could see. And one of the battalion chiefs that were with us took all the captains, and we went to try to find the fire department, New York City Fire Department command post. And we came across a young deputy at the time. And he, and probably the most chilling part of my experience, pointed at a pile of debris surrounded by cones and tape and said, "That's where our command post was. That's where our leadership is buried. We're trying to get our stuff together now." So we forged on and we tried to do some searches and help them. And the only thing I remember seeing were just devastated New York City firefighters covered in white dust and debris, still working, still trying desperately to find their brothers and sister firefighters. And it was an unbelievable feeling. We were almost walking without talking to each other, walking back to stage to get our boat ride back to New Jersey, just in utter silence, 24 veteran Newark firefighters without any words.
John, we're going to pull up the cover of the Star Ledger where you were featured, where it talks about those psychological scars. I thank you so much for coming on here to talk about that, because I know this topic, even 20 years later, cannot be easy for you.
No, and I think the 20 year for some reason, and I think I heard you say that, Lisa, the weather, everything is reminding you of that day.
Mhm.
But we were at such a different point, after that event, as tragic as it was, the country rallied together. And in my lifetime, I've never seen such unity. Everywhere you went as a firefighter, you felt welcome. Police, fire, EMS worked hand in hand. No more skirmishes or territorial battles. Anytime you seen a military person, everybody, felt obligated to give them a thumbs up and back and forth. Civilians, everybody was just in a different place. And 20 years later, I don't feel that. And that's not a good feeling. I feel that we're a lot more divided. And that tragedy brought us together, and I would have hoped it kept us together. But there is a difference. Yeah, there's a difference in then and now, in my mind.
Well, it's important for all of us not to forget, obviously, the events of that day, but to never forget exactly what you just said, the sense of unity that was within the community. And it's very important for us to get back to that soon, because society as a whole needs that.
I
John,
think that what you're doing is important to keep this going. And I think the 21st year and every year after should be a reminder of what we went through, and we don't forget.
Definitely. John, thank you so much for joining us here this morning and for sharing your story.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
Yeah, but the pandemic definitely is times really feels like it's pulling our country apart. Yesterday, President Joe Biden ordered some sweeping new federal vaccine requirements for as many as 100 million Americans. It is part of an all-out effort to increase COVID-19 vaccinations and to curb the surging Delta variant. The new mandate says that all employers with more than 100 workers require them to be vaccinated or test for the virus weekly. That's going to affect about 80 million Americans. President Biden criticized the tens of millions of Americans who are not vaccinated.
And a distinct minority of Americans, supported by a distinct minority of elected officials, are keeping us from turning the corner. These pandemic politics, as I refer to, are making people sick, causing unvaccinated people to die. We cannot allow these actions to stand in the way of protecting the large majority of Americans.
The mandate also covers federal employees, contractors, and 17 million workers at health facilities that receive federal Medicare or Medicaid, and they will also have to be fully vaccinated. New Jersey has the most coronavirus deaths per capita in the United States.
When COVID first hit our shores, there was that sense of unity in the very beginning of this.
Yes.
We all locked down for the 14 days, right? 14 days to stop the spread. And the commercials and the conversations, and, we really were all in this together, right? No matter where you fell on the socioeconomic chain, everybody was locked in, right?
Right.
And
yeah,
then
it was a sense of we are in this together. Exactly like 9/11. A week later, everybody had their flag out. You were driving. You knew what they were thinking. We all felt together.
Exactly. And then it just fell off the rails right after that 14 weeks to stop the spread. So that's unfortunate. And I don't know if, what President Biden said yesterday did anything to kind of unite us. I don't know. If you go on social media and take a peek at what the reaction was, it was all over the map, as has most of the coronavirus stuff has been.
Coronavirus, ultimately, when you go and I've, researching how to cover it as a reporter, it's a medical story, but the medical community or the medical and the political community have collided, and we can't seem to pull that web apart. And it is just feels like it's getting more and more toxic. So sometimes it's best to step away and just figure out what you can control yourself, and instead of getting so caught up in that division that is fueled by just a small few, but sometimes it feels like that's the only, the division is the only people who have the microphone. But I think together, there's way more that unites us than divides us.
Definitely. So, Laura, there's no question that COVID has impacted weddings. What has changed, and what can you expect to be different if you're attending a wedding soon? Joining us live is Candace Timmerman, event coordinator at Edgewood Country Club in Rivervale. Good morning, Candace.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So it has been a year and a half for you and your business.
It's been fun.
Yeah, I'm sure. What are you noticing that is really becoming a trend lately in COVID weddings?
I think a trend, I think we went from couples last year being, I don't want my wedding with masks on. I don't want this. I don't want that. We're much more accepting that this is our world, and our couples are really adjusting that they can celebrate. One of the big trends I see is that they went from not wanting masks at their wedding to realizing this is our world, and are now a lot of our couples are actually requesting that if their guests are not vaccinated, they're asking them in a nice way, please do not attend and celebrate from afar with us. So they're a totally different trend. They're being cautious and maybe hopefully to some degree encouraging some of their guests that aren't vaccinated to get vaccinated. And on the other end, when the other guests that are vaccinated realize that, it gives them a better comfort level. So it's kind of changing the whole way weddings are done.
Candace, I've always said there's getting married and there's having a wedding. Two different things.
Totally.
And having a wedding, it can be very stressful for a bride. So then to be in a position where they are saying, you know what, I need you to provide proof of the vaccine. How etiquetely or how do you help in handling that? Because it's a bride's day. A bride, oftentimes is called a bridezilla because she's asked for a certain shade of pink, of blush and bad. And now, and now brides are having to deal with COVID, and people are very raw and they can get very upset about this. So how's that playing out? And how do you help with that portion of it?
Yeah, I honestly have to say that I find that on our end, at least, the majority of our brides are not getting upset by all of that. They're very, on their websites, being very clear with guests. It's not getting stressful for them at all. On our end, we are able, if they'd like us to, we will, have our staff asking for proof of vaccination and checking that. We will do temperature checks. We'll do whatever we can to make their guests more comfortable. I'm finding a lot of our weddings are taking that kind of in their own hands because they want to enjoy their day and they want to know that their guests are vaccinated. And if they're not, they truly are asking them not to attend.
Wow. So I know we're talking about vaccination proof, masks, that's been at the forefront of this whole time.
Right.
What about plexiglass on the dance floor to kind of ward out germs that way? Talk about that.
We ourselves do not plexiglass a dance floor. We do plexiglass stations. We can plexiglass bars. As far as a dance floor, we try to limit the amount of people on a dance floor. At one time, where the old days, it used to be you wanted a very tight dance floor. That's no longer the case. You want a very spacious dance floor now. And on our end, we are able to accommodate that.
We've talked about so many things that have changed, that are different. But when it comes to weddings, what hasn't changed?
What hasn't changed? I think all of the things, the components that people always wanted are all there. Their entertainment, they want their food to be terrific. All the pieces, the decor, they want all of that to be perfect. I don't think any of that has changed. The one thing I think has changed is that our brides and grooms have become very accepting that this is our world. And it is going to be a little bit different, but it's still going to be wonderful.
And they can still pull off their day and still have the wedding of their dreams.
100%. It's what they've come to realize now, opposed to last year when we were all not realizing how COVID was going to affect us all and how long it was going to stay around, and where they couldn't even imagine having their wedding with a mask on and couldn't imagine having plexiglass. Now it's okay. You know what? They get it. We can still celebrate and have a fabulous day because this is our world right now.
Yeah, definitely. We have to adapt.
Mm-hmm.
Very briefly, tell us about Edgewood Country Club and what you offer.
Oh, well, we're a private country club, but we are able to host outside events. So we actually, our clubhouse was completely renovated. I love to say that it's really a very modern space, but very elegant. We are able to offer a completely, we have outdoor terrace. Our whole cocktail hour is got the feel of being outside. We have a beautiful, beautiful bridal suite, outdoor ceremony spaces. We're able to actually host outdoor events, which we did last year, throughout the major parts of COVID when it first struck. But it's just, as you can see in the pictures, it's a very modern space, very elegant. We have an amazing chef. And we also have an amazing staff. So it's a beautiful, I'm a little prejudiced, but it is a beautiful place to have a wedding.
I've been married 31 years, almost 31 years, and I still love seeing what happens behind the scenes and putting a wedding together, and how, gosh, if I could go back and fix some of the fashion issues that I have, how beautiful the flowers are. I'm really enjoying watching what you all do there, and how they've also had to evolve and roll with the times, and
100%.
Go outside when you need to, and then have those backup plans as well.
Exactly, which is exactly what we've been doing. We've just been rolling with it.
Hey, that's what a great event planner does. You just got to roll with the punches, right?
Yeah, and like you said, the best part of it is seeing it all come together.
Yeah, definitely. Candace, where can people find out more about Edgewood Country Club?
They can go online. It's edgewoodnj.com. We're also on The Knot. We're on Wedding Wire, Instagram, Facebook.
Great. Thank you so much, Candace.
No, thank you for having me. Have a great day.
You too.
All right. Well, we're on the topic of weddings, and brides want to have a perfect, picture perfect weather day. Why don't we check in with meteorologist Mike Favetta on the New Jersey weather forecast to see how it is looking for this weekend, if anybody is getting married. Actually, that would have been a good question to ask her. Is anybody getting married on September 11th? Because that, in the beginning was kind of taboo. You didn't want to have something negative, a wedding associated with 9/11. Oh, darn, missed opportunity there.
Well, there have been obviously some dates, some interesting wedding dates, especially with the COVID delayed weddings.
Right.
I attended a wedding last week on a Thursday, which is interesting, because of the timeline of trying to get weddings in, and the host of the venue said she had 4 weddings last weekend on a Labor Day weekend. So really interesting how, I guess dates are maybe going by the wayside. Yeah. Well, we've got an interesting weather pattern setting up this weekend, especially with all the clear weather forecasted, a lot of clear sky and low humidity. But if you plan to take advantage of the weekend weather out toward the beaches, there are some big swells, and that is due to Hurricane Larry spinning just a couple hundred miles offshore. Here's New Jersey, and yet here is Hurricane Larry just a couple hundred miles offshore. Now, compare this weather setup with the large hurricane spinning just off the East Coast to what happened on September 11th, 2001. This is a satellite picture of New Jersey right here with the clear sky on 9/11 and Hurricane Erin spinning just offshore a couple hundred miles away. So a very eerily similar setup to just 20 years ago. Now, our forecast going into this weekend will keep those waves high at the beaches, lots of sunshine forecast, but also, again, those really big waves. So keep that in mind, especially with some of the beaches staying unlifeguarded out toward the Atlantic City, Seaside, and Belmar. Be sure to check the lifeguard stands and those flags. With the UV running nice and high, you could still get a sunburn, especially without the sunscreen. UV is quite high going into Saturday and Sunday with all the clear sky around. Any adverse effects from pollen could be felt since we are entering the kind of the tail end of ragweed season here in New Jersey. The grasses remain moderate, but even I think going into the next few days with warmer weather ahead on the 7-day looks very pleasant even going into next week. High temperatures hold in the mid-80s with low humidity on Sunday. Very pleasant weather continuing into Monday, and then a chance of an afternoon shower by Tuesday with skies clearing again on Wednesday. So nice warm weather around, but also that low humidity reminiscent of fall as we wrap up the last few days of summer here in New Jersey.
Mike, thank you so much for bringing up those graphics from 9/11 as well, so we can kind of get, not only just hear about our weather, but get that perspective as well, and then an understanding of why things look so beautiful, and when there's hurricanes and other things happening. So thank you.
You bet.
Thanks, Mike. So next, a former governor is popping up in a place you may not expect. We'll show you next. And remember to check out the New Jersey Morning Show on social media. Please follow and like.
What would happen if I had to pick up the phone, call 911 for one of my family members or one of my neighbors? What would I do if no one was on the other end to respond? What if there was no 911? So you can be a part of the solution.
Anybody can be a firefighter. Male, female, younger, older.
We have school teachers. We have leaders in business.
Is me, you, anyone that wants to be. There is no typical firefighter.
Swing the hips.
Oh boy, they weren't kidding. Whew.
You're looking for a gold crown?
Sure. So you say you're helping people through. How are you doing that?
Welcome back to the New Jersey Morning Show. State officials broke ground yesterday on a new facility for offshore wind energy. Governor Murphy was joined by U.S. Labor Secretary Martin Walsh and elected officials from across the state at the New Jersey Wind Port in Lower Alloways Creek Township in Salem County. The facility will manufacture giant blades and other components for offshore wind energy projects along the Jersey Shore.
It represents the technological innovation, broad-based partnership, and bold investment that we need to meet the climate challenge. And it demonstrates beyond a doubt that clean energy means good jobs and an inclusive workforce.
The project will cost somewhere between $300 to $400 million. President Biden set a goal of having enough offshore wind energy to power about 10 million homes by 2030.
We're going to bring in meteorologist Mike Favetta one last chime on the New Jersey weather forecast. Now, Mike, you participated in a press conference about climate change this week. It's a topic that a lot of people are talking about, especially after Hurricane Ida.
Yeah, and this was specifically for New Jersey. So there were a lot of guest speakers that attended yesterday virtually. We had the mayor of one of the towns in New Jersey, Milburn, up in Essex County. We also talked with the Department of Environmental Protection in New Jersey, and they were hinting at a lot of work that needs to be done here across the state, but also highlighting some of the resiliency efforts that New Jersey has already undergone. For instance, I mentioned that just a few days ago, talking about the storm, New Jersey State Trooper Colonel Patrick Callahan was quoted as saying, if for every $1 New Jersey invests in climate resiliency and infrastructure, that's a $6 savings in the future. And so much of that was evident, especially where the protections were put into place over toward, say, the Bound Brook area. Not, every home was saved. There were still issues, but there were certainly many that were. And so it's some of the resiliency projects that New Jersey is working on have worked, and that was going to show that what we've done in the past is helping us, but there's still some more work to do. So it was really a call to action for the funding that could be applied here in New Jersey. And I was showing some charts there. That's what the video you see here, talking about these are the same images we showed you last week on NJ On Air. Some of the heavier downpours that are happening in New Jersey and how we're having them here across the Northeast. So a very good topic yesterday, and hopefully there's some action taken from that.
Mike, that is so cool.
It was a really, really interesting topic
So cool.
yesterday. Yeah, and I'm glad that we could kind of get some more attention to it, especially here in New Jersey. We've got some attention to the beautiful weather this weekend, especially with the clear sky, a nice dry forecast. Great for outdoor dining. If you plan to do some outdoor dining here across the state, you will have wonderful weather this evening, a nice dry breeze, and temperatures that hold in the low 70s. Very pleasant from Morristown over toward Long Branch, even Cherry Hill, and Atlantic City and Cape May, even the beach locations, feeling quite fantastic. Tomorrow, plenty of sunshine all day long, and then by Sunday, a little bit of a warmer feel. However, the humidity tries to build back in just for one day on Monday, and then cools right back down on Tuesday and Wednesday with a few showers. So there will be a little a sneak of warmer weather that tries to come back. But overall, I think the fall weather wins out over the next few days and the next 7 days here across New Jersey.
All right. Mike Favetta, thank you so much. And one more story before we wrap it up for today. Check it out. An Ocean County brewery, they've completely sold out of a special beer they offered for Labor Day weekend. It's called Private Beach. Wait for it. Everyone from New Jersey knows this image. It sparked numerous memes and jokes that continue to this day. We don't have the picture up just now, but it's the picture of Governor Chris Christie on the beach. I did not make this beer. I'm not endorsing it. I'm just reading copy. Yes, this picture is going to definitely follow the former governor for the rest of his life. Private Beach is 4.1% American Blonde Ale, and it's made by Icarus Brewing in Lakewood.
That is classic. I'm not a beer drinker. I don't know if you guys are, but I would have totally just bought the can as a collector.
Here's the question. If you got it, I wonder if you asked him to sign it, because the former governor has had a decent sense of humor sometime. Would he actually sign it, or would he just totally be like, get out of my face? I don't know the answer.
I think it depends on how you catch him, what kind of mood he's in.
True.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hysterical. Mike, do you drink beer?
I do. And I'm sure it's wonderful, and kind of little humor to go along with it. Got to look forward to try it.
Mike, Laura,
and laugh at things. There's so much going on. You have to be able to laugh, even at yourself.
Definitely. And whoever drew that cartoon, great job. Great job out of them. Mike, Laura, thank you so much for joining me here this morning. And thank you for watching us on the New Jersey Morning Show. We're live every Friday morning at 9 a.m. Enjoy this beautiful weekend, and be sure to follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter for more on our show. Next week, we will be live and in living color at our Fairfield studio. So stay tuned to updates on that. We're very excited, and we will see you soon. Have a great one, everyone.